What began as a peaceful family dinner suddenly grew tense when Princess Charlotte stood up, her voice trembling yet resolute, voicing what no one had dared say in front of Queen Camilla. The room fell silent, William's eyes filled with pride, while Camilla angrily left the table. The evening had started like any other, a carefully planned attempt at reconciliation at the lavish royal estate, hidden behind walls gilded in gold and shimmering silver. Beneath the polite words lay a tense atmosphere. King Charles, always the peacemaker, showed signs of weariness as he struggled to mend the fractured family, hoping to ease the conflict between his wife and heir. The long table glowed with lavish light, but beneath it sharp glances cut like knives. Charlotte remained silent at first, arms crossed her youthful face, calm, yet eyes filled with an unusual determination. If you find this story interesting, leave a comment with the number 1. If not, leave a comment with 0. Don't forget to like, share the video, and drop your thoughts in the comments below to let us know what you think. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more exciting videos. Now let's get started with the story. She watched the forced smiles exchanged between her parents and grandparents, sensing the tension in the air like a storm on the brink of breaking. When the conversation shifted to honoring legacy and the future of the monarchy, Camilla's voice cut through coldly. Some of the best memories are better left in the past. The words felt like a direct strike at Charlotte's grandmother, Diana. Her breath caught fists clenched under the table, but this time Charlotte didn't stay silent. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, eyes locked on the Queen. You tried to erase her, her voice trembling but firm, but you will never erase Diana. The entire table froze. King Charles dropped his fork. Kate's eyes widened in disbelief. William leaned back, a thin smile forming on his lips, and his words echoed through the room. Well done, Charlotte. His applause began softly, then grew louder, more defiant, each clap ringing out with deliberate weight. Camilla's fury ignited instantly. Her face flushed red with disbelief, stunned that a child would dare rise and confront her in front of the entire family. She slammed her napkin down on the table, the sharp crack like a whip, and stood abruptly, heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she stormed out. Not another word. The silence she left behind was thick and suffocating. Princess Anne blinked slowly, murmuring something inaudible under her breath. George stared at his sister and grandmother in stunned awe, as if watching a new chapter in royal history being written right before his eyes. Within seconds, royal aides rushed in, some attempting to persuade Camilla to return to the table, others scrambling to assess the situation and contain the narrative before it spilled beyond the palace walls. But it was already too late. Within hours, rumors had swept through the press, marking the beginning of a new chapter in royal history, one not written by a king or queen, but by a young princess who dared to speak the truth. But what exactly did Charlotte say that shattered the atmosphere in the room? And how did the roots of this conflict begin long before she was even born? Behind her composed demeanor and picture-perfect smile, Charlotte quietly observed, learned, and endured pain. What the public didn't know was the silent burden she carried, the legacy of Diana, the whispers of favoritism, and the growing distance between her and the queen consort. In front of the cameras, Charlotte appeared to be the ideal princess, poised, polite, offering graceful waves and practiced smiles. But beneath the surface, she absorbed everything, every word, every look, quietly weaving a tapestry of sorrow, confusion, and silent defiance. Time and again, Diana's name would surface, sometimes spoken with reverence, other times brushed aside with subtle disdain. And Charlotte never forgot any of it. Although no one explained the reasons clearly, Charlotte could sense Diana's presence both honored and erased in the royal memory pushed aside from the carefully crafted palace narrative. She began asking the questions Kate had long feared. Why don't they talk about her? Why isn't her photo anywhere here? At first, Kate answered gently, choosing her words carefully to preserve the fragile peace around them. But the more Charlotte uncovered, the more connected she felt to her late grandmother. Through late-night stories Kate shared about kindness in hardship and courage in the face of rejection, Charlotte began to feel Diana as a quiet flame burning within her heart. Gradually, her questions shifted from curiosity to a growing sense of doubt. In whispered conversations, Alice spoke of Camilla's efforts to reshape her public image, trying to ensure the role of queen would no longer be overshadowed by Diana's legacy. Camilla often avoided mentioning Diana, believing that too much focus on the past would weaken the monarchy's future. To Charlotte, it felt like a slap in the face, a betrayal of the woman who had left such a deep mark on her father's heart and on her own sense of justice. She found herself torn between respecting royal tradition and being haunted by the parts of that tradition that had been deliberately erased. William was the first to notice the subtle changes in his daughter. His brow would furrow whenever Camilla spoke of modernization, his hands tightening under the table when someone referred to Diana's legacy as a complicated issue. Those small acts of quiet resistance didn't escape him. He began to open up, sharing personal memories not as a prince, but as Diana's son. He told Charlotte about her mother's warm embraces, her resilience in the shadows of the palace, and the quiet courage she showed in the face of loneliness. Each story deepened the bond between Charlotte and her father, while also intensifying her resentment toward Camilla. That inner conflict played out silently within her, almost invisible to most, except to the few keen enough to notice. Day by day, Charlotte came to feel that Camilla's influence on the royal narrative was not just unfair, it was a profound insult to the memory of the woman she saw as a guiding light. That emotional storm simmered within Charlotte until a symbolic event pushed her beyond the boundary of silence. It was meant to be a proud moment, her first private viewing of the royal crown she would one day wear at a future historic occasion. But when Camilla seized the iconic piece once tied to Diana and offered her a different heirloom instead, something inside Charlotte shattered. The room, bathed in the soft light of afternoon, fell into an eerie stillness, a silence that felt dangerous. What had been carefully staged as an intimate traditional rite, a young princess being introduced to the dazzling beauty that would one day grace her head, was in truth a test. And Charlotte saw it for exactly what it was. Her gaze was drawn toward the crown she had longed to see, but it was the Spencer tiara that truly captured her attention, its delicate design and radiant legacy gleaming from within its velvet case. It wasn't just jewelry. It was history, defiance, and truth all contained in one heirloom the palace wished to forget. The crown her grandmother had worn on her wedding day, the symbol of Diana's grace, defiance, and unforgettable spirit, stood before her. Without hesitation, Charlotte reached for it as if it were calling her by name. In that frozen moment, everything held its breath. Then came a voice cold and commanding. Camilla's tone cut through the silence. No. She shut the velvet box with deliberate finality, her fingers precise and unyielding, far from the image of a modern princess. That piece belongs to a bygone era. It's best left in the past. Her words hit harder than diamonds. Charlotte froze, her hands still suspended where the crown had just been. She turned to Kate, hoping for a sign of protest, a word of defense. But Kate remained silent, her lips pressed tightly together, knuckles pale with restraint. Meanwhile, Camilla calmly slid forward, another crown, less striking, less meaningful, dimmer in every way. Charlotte stared at the substitute, her chest tightening with a mix of humiliation and fury. This wasn't just about a crown. It was about her grandmother being erased piece by piece from the story. She lifted her eyes to Camilla, and in that gaze burned something the queen hadn't expected. Then, without a word, Charlotte turned and walked away, tears stinging her cheeks. But they weren't tears of surrender. They were tears forged from a resolve born of pain. That night alone in her room, Charlotte whispered the words she had long been too afraid to say, "One day I will wear that crown." The vow struck deep, turning the moment into a trial by fire, igniting something sharp and unyielding within her. If Camilla thought that denying Charlotte the crown could erase Diana's memory, it was a grave miscalculation. The forbidden crown was no longer just a keepsake, it had become a symbol of everything Charlotte was determined to reclaim. But first, she would need the most crucial support of all. That person was her father, the one who still grieved Diana more deeply than anyone else. In the quiet halls of Kensington Palace, father and daughter whispered truths no one else dared to speak aloud. William, once the closely guarded prince, had become Charlotte's most trusted confidant, offering her a kind of freedom she never knew she needed. He had been watching her closely in recent weeks, sensing a profound shift that others chose to ignore. She moved more slowly through the corridors now, the wide-eyed curiosity that once lit her gaze dimmed, replaced by a weight he knew all too well. She had grown unusually contemplative, her questions sharper, her silences longer and more pointed. One evening, when he could no longer ignore it, he called her into his study. She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands nervously twisting in her lap, while he watched her in silence for a long moment before asking, "What's on your mind?" At first she said nothing, but finally she uttered the question he had both feared and hoped she would ask. "Why do they want us to forget her?" In that instant, all his restraint crumbled. Every ounce of loyalty that demanded silence in the name of duty shattered. He told her truths no one else dared to speak, not just about Diana's kindness, but her quiet pain. Not just about her strength, but the wounds she bore because of it. He told her how Diana had fought to protect her sons, even when it cost her everything. She was both adored and feared within those palace walls because she refused to be erased. Then, in a low but resolute voice, he confessed something he had never dared to say aloud, his disappointment at Camilla's growing influence, and the anger he felt as Diana's memory was buried beneath carefully curated narratives. Leaning toward her, his eyes locked on hers, he spoke the words she would never forget. "Say what you need to say. I'll always have your back." Those words wrapped around her like armor, transforming her from a quiet, compliant child into someone who now carried the raw, unvarnished truth of her grandmother's legacy and the silent, unshakable vow of her father's protection. Each clap of William's hands rang out like a defiant bell tearing through the heavy silence that hung over the room. The sound wasn't just a gesture of support for Charlotte, it was a clear, unwavering challenge to Camilla and to all those working to erase Diana's memory. His steadfast solidarity became a shield around the young princess, guarding her against the weight of expectation and suppression while igniting a flame of truth in an environment clouded by suspicion and concealment. If you find this story interesting and want to keep exploring, don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our exciting upcoming content. Now let's continue the story. Camilla. Though she tried to maintain a calm exterior with her usual unreadable expression, couldn't hide the flash of anger and deep surprise in her eyes. She hadn't expected that the young girl, the one she believed would quietly conform to the unspoken rules of the monarchy, would dare to stand up to her so openly and with such unwavering support from her father. It was a shock that rattled her composure, shaking the foundations of her standing within both the family and the palace. The other members at the table couldn't escape the powerful emotional tide sweeping through the room. King Charles, his fork still frozen mid-air, wore a look of confusion and astonishment at his granddaughter's bold words. Kate, her eyes wide with disbelief, hadn't imagined the confrontation would unfold right before her. George, sitting quietly, seemed to sense the weight of the moment, a shift in history taking place before his young eyes, his innocent gaze touched with a trace of awe. Everyone was pulled into the thick charged atmosphere, an unspoken space where long-buried truths had just been laid bare, and centuries-old assumptions were suddenly fiercely challenged. Charlotte stood tall at the dining table, her heart still pounding beneath her composed exterior, but her gaze was sharper, steadier than ever before. She knew this moment would change everything, her own life and the image of the royal family she was bound to inherit. She understood now that her voice wasn't just her own. It was a shield for the memory of the grandmother she admired, a symbol too powerful to be forgotten or denied. This moment didn't just mark a turning point for Charlotte, it signaled a shift in how the royal family saw itself. It was no longer just a story of tradition and ceremony, but one of courage in the face of truth and the unshakable strength of love that endures beyond silence, beyond rules, beyond time. The story of Diana, told through Charlotte's voice and supported quietly but steadfastly by William, became a symbol of resistance, a truth that could not be buried. From that moment, the young princess embarked on a new journey, one where she was not only a member of the royal family, but also the keeper of memory, justice, and hope. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, yet it held a fresh sense of belief that genuine values and love would rise above political schemes and false facades. It was a promising new beginning, opening the door to profound change within the royal household, led by a voice that was youthful, resilient, and unyielding. William remained unshaken, his steady gaze locked on Camilla as he spoke firmly. "Well done, Charlotte." His soft applause sparked like a flame in the tense room, bolstering the spirit of his young daughter who dared to stand up against power and oppression. But the fury long suppressed within Camilla now erupted like a storm at last. She sprang to her feet, her face flushed with a mix of humiliation and rage, her eyes sharp and accusing, cutting through the family she believed was steadily undermining her authority and dignity before the entire royal household.
I think the girls with their nails done now.
"Enough!" Camilla shouted, her voice rising sharply, breaking into sharp dramatic crescendos like a tense operatic aria. She demanded respect, condemning the theatrics and irresponsible actions tarnishing the royal image. But no one moved or spoke in response. The atmosphere thickened, instantly charged, and on the verge of exploding, yet beneath it all lay something deeper than defiance, a truth finally spoken aloud. At last, Camilla slammed her napkin down on the table, the sharp slap of fabric against wood echoing like a declaration of war. Without looking back, she stormed out, leaving behind a room so silent you could hear every breath. Eyes remained fixed wide with shock and disbelief. And the composed and seasoned cousin gave a slight knowing smile as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. She leaned back and muttered just loud enough for those nearby to hear. Well, it was about time someone had the courage to speak up. But this was more than a personal clash or an outburst of emotion. The consequences ran far deeper, carrying profound political weight that threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Camilla, known for her relentless spirit, would surely not accept defeat without a fierce fight. Within just a few hours, the royal machine swung into overdrive. Carefully orchestrated leaks were strategically released, and urgent press conferences were held behind closed doors. A meticulously crafted media campaign sought to portray Charlotte as an overly emotional, naive girl, overly influenced by shadowy adults behind the scenes. The young princess's image gradually morphed into a symbol of instability and lack of control. Headlines began to surface with subtle language suggesting she had misunderstood family dynamics and the heavy responsibilities the monarchy carried. Some close sources even went further, claiming Charlotte was simply a child too immature to fully grasp political and social complexities, and that her actions were nothing more than thoughtless, youthful rebellion. Camilla's supporters were determined to turn Charlotte's strength and courage into signs of weakness and instability, twisting a genuine and brave voice into a tangled mess of immaturity and impulsiveness. They aimed to sow public doubt about her intentions, and maturity shoring up Camilla's fragile and wavering position. Meanwhile, on the other side, William and Charlotte quietly understood that this battle was only just beginning. They knew they had to stay persistent and hold on to their faith because truth and justice take time to be heard, but once awakened, they become an unshakable force. William could no longer bear the increasingly blatant distortion of the story, a severe twisting that threatened to taint his daughter's steadfast will and determination. The simmering anger within him burned like a dark flame beneath his skin, slow to ignite, but impossible to extinguish. In a decisive and unexpected move, he canceled 2 scheduled public appearances events where he and Camilla were supposed to stand side by side. This action was more than just a postponement. It sent a clear and powerful message. William refused to side with Camilla in her propaganda campaign. The news of the event cancellations quickly sent shockwaves through the palace press office. Assistants and advisors scrambled to manage the fallout, struggling to explain the sudden rift between William and Camilla amid growing media curiosity and speculation. Meanwhile, Charles remained silent, caught between 2 separate worlds within his slowly fracturing family. On one side was his wife's fury and determination. On the other, the quiet but resolute resistance of the future heirs. Charles's unsettling silence became a statement in itself, a symbol of an irreparable divide. To some, that silence was a sign of weakness and indecision. To others, it was a calculated strategy, a tactic of waiting for the right moment to intervene. Whatever the case, his refusal to take sides plunged the monarchy into deep division and tension, like a silent battle on the verge of erupting into open conflict. Kate, with her calm composure and characteristic caution, chose her own path, a silent yet meaningful one. At a pre-scheduled royal event, she deliberately avoided standing next to Camilla, instead keeping a few steps' distance. Under the watchful eyes of the media and guests, Kate's composed and even somewhat cold demeanor sent a clear message she did not support Camilla and stood firmly behind her daughter, protecting the future of the next generation. This quiet act sparked widespread speculation that Kate was quietly preventing Camilla from savoring a public victory. Within the grand walls of the palace, new alliances quickly formed overnight. Longtime staff whispered among themselves, clearly dividing into factions, the Camilla team and the Charlotte team. Each side began covert operations, crafting strategies and preparing for a prolonged and fierce struggle. Advisors and senior staff faced a difficult choice to take a side or remain in the shadows to stay safe amid the escalating political storm. Meanwhile, as the palace wrestled for power and influence, the public outsiders to the royal intrigues made their own choice. Unexpectedly, their decision shook the very foundation of the monarchy more than anything before. With the nation still mourning and haunted by Diana's memory, this time the voice no longer came from her, but from her granddaughters, a new generation, passionate, strong, and unyielding. England, moved by deep empathy and renewed hope, chose a princess they saw as the new symbol of the people, one who carried Diana's bloodline and the fierce desire to protect an irreplaceable legacy. Charlotte, with her courage and authenticity, became the emblem of a generation fighting not only for her family's honor, but for the very soul of a nation. In the days following the tense banquet, Charlotte's influence spread far beyond the palace walls. Not through the words of courtiers or official press releases, but through the hearts and voices of millions of ordinary people, those who saw in her the same courageous light they once saw in Diana. Social media quickly became a lively battlefield where admiration and outrage intertwined, but above all, the sentiment toward Charlotte was an undeniable celebration. Hashtags like "Charlotte never backs down," "Diana lives on," and "Princess" of the people spread at an astonishing speed, erupting like an unstoppable wave. Across all platforms, praises for her as the reborn flame of Diana became a vivid reality, a bold symbol that the royal establishment had long tried to suppress. Images of Charlotte from previous events were widely shared. The sharp eyes, steady stride, determined face, no longer a timid or evasive girl, but a woman standing firm, refusing to be forgotten. Across England, murals suddenly appeared on city walls. Images of Charlotte alongside Diana at Helfra quickly became symbols of continuity and aspiration. Her words were etched in stone and painted on walls, echoing through every street, delivering a powerful message of loyalty to an indelible memory. Newspapers were flooded with editorials offering diverse perspectives. Some praised Charlotte's courage as a historic turning point, a new banner for the younger generation, and an unforgettable reminder of Diana's legacy. Yet others questioned the long-term consequences, the fragility of the already wounded royal image, and whether this defiance might shatter the unspoken rules that had long sustained the monarchy. Meanwhile, for Camilla, the storm of public opinion was relentless. Her approval ratings in polls plummeted to alarming levels. Once met with cautious acceptance and hope, she now faced open hostility. She was accused not only of diminishing Diana's memory, but also of directly threatening the future of the monarchy. Even Camilla's most carefully orchestrated public appearances were met with cold stares, whispers, and outright ridicule from crowds that had once accepted her presence. Royal observers began to notice a striking change in Charlotte's demeanor almost overnight. Once cautious and reserved, she now appeared calm, defiant, and stronger than ever. In public, she no longer avoided eye contact when near Camilla. Instead, she held her gaze with quiet yet unwavering confidence. Whether speaking with photographers or spending time with children, Charlotte exuded a bold charisma and courage, an image almost parallel to her grandmother Diana. Royal analysts and media commentators started calling this Diana's defiance a raw honesty, unpolished and unfiltered that no royal protocol could hide or suppress. The return of such an icon shook not only the monarchy, but also the heart of the nation. Behind the scenes, Kate and William made no effort to hide their support for Charlotte. Although their actions retained the subtlety and discretion typical of the royal family, their allegiance was clearer than ever. Charlotte was placed at the center of official ceremonies, her voice and image prioritized in events where she had once been sidelined. Even her wardrobe choices carried strong symbolic references to Diana's legacy, from colors and styles to the smallest details, as a silent declaration to the world about who truly holds the loyalty and affection of the nation. Upon learning of his father's decision, William couldn't hide his relief yet. That relief carried with it a deep, unspoken worry. His heart sighed at the calming of a brewing storm, but grew heavier with the uncertain consequences ahead. William understood that Camilla's temporary retreat was not a true surrender, but a dangerous pause, an opportunity for factions within the palace to strengthen their positions, for new plans to be quietly woven, and for deeper fractures to form within the royal family's core. The silence Charles requested a necessary pause was not merely to soothe public outrage, but also his attempt to hold on to the fragile threads of unity within the royal family. He was acutely aware that if this conflict dragged on, it could threaten not only the family's reputation, but also the future of the monarchy itself. It was an invisible weight on his shoulders so heavy that at times he felt as though he were carrying an entire kingdom on his back. Meanwhile, Camilla emerged from the private room with an unreadable expression, carrying with her a deep sense of loneliness and simmering resentment. Her temporary withdrawal from public appearances wasn't a surrender, it was a calculated move she was forced to make. With a resilient spirit and unshakable ambition, Camilla refused to be overshadowed by Diana's lingering presence or the fire burning within Charlotte. Quietly, she began to strategize using silence as her shield, waiting for the right moment to return stronger, tougher, ready to extinguish any flame that dared to threaten the throne or her rightful place beside it. Elsewhere, Charlotte left her meeting with Charles in a completely different state of mind. His words of praise and warning acted like a guiding light, helping her realize that restraint was not a sign of weakness, but a wise tactic in this grueling battle. She understood clearly that the road ahead would be anything but smooth. Courage had brought her this far, but it would be wisdom and patience that would carry her forward, not just for herself, but for Diana's memory and the values she stood to protect. Outside the palace walls, public opinion and the media continued to roar. The people weren't just siding with Charlotte. They were placing their hopes in a new vision for the monarchy, one where truth is spoken and dignity preserved. Social media flooded with supportive hashtags, photos, and articles praising her as a new symbol of honesty and justice. This shift was no longer just a personal battle. It had become a revolution in public sentiment and a sign of real change stirring among the people.
The girls with their nails done now.
In contrast, Queen Camilla now faced a steep decline in public credibility. Her approval ratings had plummeted, and her public appearances became lightning rods for criticism and mockery. Crowds that were once indifferent had turned cold, even hostile. She was no longer seen as a figure of grace and authority, but as a symbol of division and conflict. Every step she took was now under intense scrutiny, as if each outing were a battlefield where she had to fight to hold on to her place. Inside, the palace factions were beginning to reveal their true faces and hidden agendas. Behind closed doors, tense whispers, secret meetings, and calculating glances became the norm. Senior officials and advisors found themselves having to choose sides or desperately trying to stay neutral in a conflict that showed no signs of slowing down. But no one could predict what would come next, because this was no longer just a personal dispute, it had become a battle of belief, legacy, and the very destiny of a nation. The deep rift within the royal family had become a defining echo in history, marking the beginning of a new era, one of transparency, defiance, and unpredictable sacrifice. Among it all, Charlotte's voice rose not merely as that of a young woman, but as a symbol of the future so many hoped for, where the shadows of the past would slowly be replaced by the light of truth and the courage to speak it. In a private conversation later leaked to the public, he was heard saying, "In the end, he chose the right path." At the same time, the public, who had already placed their sympathy with Charlotte, seemed to quietly agree. The royal press office issued a rare statement reaffirming Diana's place in royal history, calling her an indelible part of the monarchy's legacy, a brief sentence, yet deeply meaningful. As the dust began to settle, a quiet question echoed within the palace walls. What would become of Charlotte? Still just a young girl, she had already become a force. In a single night, Princess Charlotte proved she was not just a member of the royal family, she was someone willing to stand up. For the first time, the monarchy was forced to acknowledge the new light shining from her. From that small moment of challenge at the dinner table, a quiet transformation began within the palace. Insiders whispered that Charlotte might hold power far beyond anyone's expectations. She was no longer merely a support for her brother's future reign, but could become a symbolic spiritual leader, if not in title, then in influence. Behind the scenes, the young princess was being carefully prepared for more public appearances. Every schedule, lesson, and advisor was adjusted, as if the family acknowledged that the world would no longer wait for her to remain silent in the shadows. Kate, with a mix of pride and caution, was said to have spoken with the staff in a rare blend of excitement and seriousness. She carried within her the strength of Diana and the steadfastness of William. Meanwhile, Camilla kept a clear distance. The Queen had recently appeared alone at events, her smiles and gestures more rehearsed than ever before. Even now, she avoided places where Charlotte was present, fully aware that her presence only heightened the silent tension between them. All eyes were now on Charlotte's next appearance. Every word and movement she made was scrutinized closely. The crowd wasn't just eager to see a princess, they wanted to witness the symbol of a young woman who dared to break the silence, reminding the nation of the values that once inspired faith in the monarchy. The monarchy was evolving, and the fragile yet hopeful future might rest in the hands of the girl who refused to stay silent. If you find Princess Charlotte's story inspiring and fascinating, don't forget to hit the like button to show your support. Share this video with your friends and family so you can follow together the brave journey of this rising royal star. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting stories and the latest news about the royal family, as well as other unique topics. Thanks for watching the entire video, and see you in the next ones.